Hello, I am the author of the story Calliope Returns, The Revealing of Magic and Myths. I never really liked the title, but it is what the publisher said would be best. I was going to use Magic, Myths, and Everything Else as a title, but at the time I submitted the book, it was a rush job due to the events of the time. Also, the publisher was barely one step above a vanity press. Now that I have filled in the missing chapters and put everything I want, I would call it Steam, Magic, and Chainmail Bikini. If you like steampunk, you might like this. If you like fantasy and magic, you might like this. If you like both, then you're in luck. This story has both. I retain full audio rights and I'll read some of it. Some parts will be a robot reader. I will edit the robot so as not to make mispronounced words. I will have some original composed music and I will add illustrations. Some will be pictures I find that fit the scene. Some will be bad drawings I make. I may try doing some chapters in an audio play format if possible. I might try and have a scene or two acted out as a video. I retain the audio rights but not so much the written rights. Sorry, I will not put stretches of text on the screen. But if you want to read the original book, leave a comment. I will be happy to text you the PDF file for free. As long as I'm able to get at least one regular viewer, I will continue to make new content. Now on with the book. It is a spring day. The sun is low, and the sky is darkening. Farmers return from fields of bright green wheat and beans for their evening meal, calling to each other in greeting as they pass on the village streets. While they are making their way home, the sky fills with dust and the sound of horses' hooves, the riders on black snorting war horses, followed by what the farmers can only assume to be hundreds of foot soldiers. Panic spreads throughout the village. The farmers start running to their homes. Doors slam, windows shutters close. Men and women peer out of cracks in the wood, watching the soldiers. Some people even run to the river's edge, only to find the deep water will provide no escape. The soldiers march on, heavily armed with shields, short swords, and spears. The farmers can't make out the insignia on the shields, given the dust both in the air and on the shields themselves. This gives the soldiers an even more menacing appearance. The dark uniforms with splashes of red and blue are the only way to identify they are actually Imperial soldiers. Few, but not many of the farmers exit their homes, curiosity getting the better of them. One man who ran into his home didn't do so to hide. Immediately he goes into the bedchamber. Without saying a word to his wife, Lucinda, he kneels down beside their bed, pulling a chest from underneath. Inside, dusty from being shut away for so long, are a sword and a full shirt of blackened chainmail. Many years ago he had been a soldier, so he knew the ways of war, but this weapon and armor had not been his to wear. It had belonged to his grandfather, who wore it during the last Goblin War. He felt a need for it now. Interrupting thoughts, his wife comes to the doorway. Jacob, she waits a moment. When he does not answer, she repeats, Jacob, his wife cries, her voice sounding desperate and scared. Why are the soldiers here now? I'm not sure, but that doesn't matter. You stay here with Calliope until I return. He looks up at her, pulling the items out of the chest and heading towards the door, putting the shirt on as he's walking out. I mean it, he says, sternly. Mind me, woman. You stay indoors. Jacob barely has time to don the shirt before he runs out the door, leaving the rest of the contents behind. Jacob runs up the road towards town square. Some farmers watch as he runs by, then follow behind him. Others had arrived short before Jacob. Most of the farmers don't have what would be considered conventional weapons, since war is a thing of the past. Most don't feel the need for those types of things anymore. They are peaceful villagers and don't want to cause any problems with other of the nearby villages. Even the stones from the wall that once encircled the town were used to pave the main square. The farmers stand around, waiting for something to happen. The soldiers are waiting on orders from their captain. It is a standoff, at least for the moment. Men on each side stare each other down. When Jacob settles into a spot near the center of the farmers, he overhears the lord of the village talking to what appears to be a man in charge of the soldiers. They are already in depth with the conversation. Honored sir, we are happy to provide any service and hospitality we have. There is no need to confiscate anything, for we will gladly give it. The lord tries to sound diplomatic, while obviously distressed at the thought of anyone coming to harm the men and women of his village. The captain says nothing in reply to this. Instead, he looks to the right. A standard bearer places his banner across his lap and pulls a scroll from the side saddle of his horse. In a loud, imposing voice, the farmers hear, The Emperor Ganon proclaims that this village and its wealth, stores, livestock, and residence are now his property. Any man who hinders the acquisition of such property shall be put to death. As the standard bearer finishes speaking, the captain raises his sword. A loud cry comes from the soldiers, both on horseback and on foot. The shocked farmers are no match. Lucinda and her daughter, Calliope, watch from their home, overlooking the village. Mama, they take the town. What are we going to do? Calliope screams. She's afraid. This fear is unlike anything she has ever felt. Calliope watches in stunned silence as a horseman ride past, draw his sword, and above his shoulder, and striking with all precision, slices one of the neighboring farmers almost in half. She goes limp against the doorway. She is unable to tear her eyes away from the horror, but unable to understand why this is happening. Seeing what has happened to her daughter, Lucinda grabs her arm, hustling her into the house. Lock the door and don't let anyone in. Anyone, Calliope. Do you understand? Lucinda's voice is concerned but stern. Calliope does not answer her mother, her eye instead returning to the destruction that is continuing outside her home. Calliope, her mother yells, grabbing her about the shoulders, trying to rouse her from the shock. Do you understand? Lucinda asks yet again, looking deeply into Calliope's eyes. The girl nods numbly. I will return for you. Her mother promises and flies out the door. She grabs a pitchfork that is standing against the inside of the doorway and runs towards the village. After her mother leaves, Calliope collapses onto the floor in shock and disbelief. She can hear the screaming outside the windows. Clasping her hands over her ears, closing her eyes tight, she tries to drown out the sound. The fighting doesn't last long. Most are dead or dying before Lucinda even reaches the town proper. Most, but not all. Jacob is still fighting, and there are many dead and wounded soldiers around him. It is not because of his sword skill, however, as there are too many enemies for even the most skilled swordsmen, but because he cannot be harmed. The bolts from crossbows bounce off his mail shirt with no effect. Where he has pulled an arrow from his leg, the wound heals immediately. Where his clothes are torn from his body, his skin seems as pervious as well. It does not last, however. Jacob grows weaker as he fights on. Eventually his wounds do not heal as quickly, and the arrows begin to drive further into his mail. His exposed skin does not resist the slices and jabs that it had before. Soon the soldiers are standing over him, beating and chopping away. Lucinda attempts to join her husband, and tries to break the crush of soldiers surrounding him. She even loses the pitchfork as it is taken away from her. Then strangely, the soldiers that are holding Lucinda back collapse as if they have been knocked unconscious. That is when she makes her break to run to her husband's side. But it is already too late, for the soldiers attacking Jacob are backing away, now satisfied that he would not rise again. Kneeling beside her dead husband, Lucinda takes him in her arms and wails. The soldiers advance to take her. She retrieves the knife Jacob held as his second and throws it with all her might and rage at the dark rider just seated on his mount. Whether by skill or chance, the knife grazes his neck, carving a deep wound. The dark rider cries out and reaches to staunch the flow of blood. Arrows find their way into the woman's chest. Her eyes never losing the look of rage. She gasps only once and falls upon the corpse of her beloved. The raiders set about the village, collecting the survivors and any items of value. As they finish checking a building, they torch it, not wanting to leave anything traceable behind. Calliope has not been able to see the battle from inside her home, but she sees the flames licking the sky and the thick black smoke billowing over the fields. It fills the sky, blackening out the setting sun. She continues to wait for her mother, her father, neighbor, anyone to come and make her feel safe again. She watches as the torches bounce up the road to her home. Like a line of ants on fire they come. At a loss as to how to save herself, she backs into the hearth, hoping that the dark cooking pot there will conceal her, silently begging that those holding the torches are those she knows and cares for, only somehow knowing they are not. The torches light the air around the house. If it is noon, Calliope can see shadows through the windows. Then the horrible pounding comes, and finally comes the sound of cracking timber, the door coming to rest in pieces on the floor, not far from where she hides. Calliope feels as if she is in a dream, watching without emotion as the soldiers swarm in her home, searching for anything of value. This isn't really happening to her. It is someone else's life, someone else's misfortune. She realizes this is not the truth. This is her house, and the people inside mean to harm her if they find her. As if hearing her thoughts, a soldier leans into the hearth, his eyes wide with surprise and discovery. Ho, ho, what have we here? This might be the most valuable thing in this shack. He grabs her arm, dragging her from her hiding spot and out into the dusk. They are on the road to town when the first of the torches hit the roofs. As they meet other soldiers, the group of captive girls, seeing neighbors suffering the same fate as she, brings Calliope out of her stupor. She begins to look around, taking in the horror of what has occurred and what continues to occur. as the soldiers take sport in torturing the survivors, being crammed into carts like pigs for slaughter. But for most, it is the horrible shackles that awaited them as the survivors are chained together in columns of two. The villagers are herded like cattle past town square. She sees the bodies of her parents in the street, recognizing by the demon light of the fires. Without thinking, she breaks from the crowd and runs to their side. "Get her! We are behind schedule as it is," yells a rider. Several foot soldiers advance on her. Calliope kisses her mother's cold face and bolts right into the village well, jumping up onto its edge. "Don't come any closer, I'll jump in and drown myself," she yells. The men laugh at her threat. "Go ahead, jump," says one. "One less snot-nosed brat to worry about." Calliope steps from the edge and disappears down the dark well. "Well, I'll be damned," says another. "Didn't think she'd do it." The men laugh again, turning to the captives.